Welcome to this masterclass on how to ace your base. My name is Hannah and I'm one of the leads in the Mecca education team. Over the last 7 years, I've had the great pleasure of training team members across Australia and New Zealand in all things makeup. We have over 20,000 makeup products here at Mecca, and so it's my job to help break everything down and demystify, because trust me, it is just as daunting for team members as it is for customers. In this Makeup Fundamentals course, we're going to be covering all things makeup, from complexion, brows, eyes, lips, and cheeks. In today's session, we're going to be giving you all of the tools you need to ace your base. We're going to cover primer, foundation, concealer, and powder. We're going to give you the tools to be able to select the right formula, the right finish, and the right shade. And we're also going to give you some great tips on the best ways to apply. And to show you all of these tips and tricks, I'm joined by 3 beautiful models. We have Francesca, Anusha, and Sylvia. So the perfect place to start is primer. We often get asked in store, do I really need a primer? And there are a couple of different answers to that question. So you might be looking to purchase a primer because you want to increase the longevity of your foundation. You may want to adjust the texture of your skin, so maybe minimizing or blurring pores. You may want to slightly color correct the skin. You may also want to increase glow. To adjust all of these things, primers really are a really great place to start. So how do you choose the right primer for you? Well, once you've decided the effect that it's going to have on your complexion, you can really easily navigate by thinking about texture or finish. So if you are looking for something that's going to smooth the skin, minimize pores, you may want to opt for a primer that's a little bit more tactile. You'll sort of notice that it has that sort of silky texture, and you'll really notice that it starts to kind of blur on the skin. If you're looking for something that is going to adjust color or increase glow on the skin, you'll want to go for something that's a little bit more visual. So when you pop the product onto the back of your hand, you'll notice that color change or that increased glow. As we've discussed primers being tactile or visual, there are also a lot of primers that combine the best of both worlds. Another great way to navigate primers is to think about your skin type. Primers really help you to work with your skin type and not against it. So for example, if you're someone that has an oily skin type, but you really love a glowy foundation, you may want to opt for a mattifying primer. So then you're kind of helping the skin type, but still getting the effect that you want with your foundation. So our lovely model Francesca here likes to wear a little bit more of a lightweight base. So we're actually going to multi-prime. So we're going to use a color correcting primer just to even out the skin tone. But because Fran has a little bit more of a combination skin type and tends to get a little bit oily through the center, we're going to use a little bit more of a mattifying smoothing primer just where she needs it. So we're going to start applying the primer. I really like to use fingers when applying primer because you can also really have a feel of the skin and see if there's any maybe surprise texture going on. And so we're just evening out the skin tone with this one. And again, primers are just such a great tool to be able to customize your foundation and your finish without having to buy a whole new foundation. So now we're going in with our mattifying smoothing primer, and we're going to be a little bit more precise where we use this one. If you are concerned with enlarged pores, a great little tip with your smoothing primer is actually to work against the grain. So you're kind of pushing that product into the pore and smoothing out that texture. And so you want to apply your mattifying or smoothing primer into those spots where you'll develop that shine during the day. So it tends to be kind of just next to the nose, on the nose, and through the center of the forehead. So now that we're primed, it's ready for foundation. Now, if you are still on a journey to find your perfect foundation, there are 3 key things to keep in mind: finish, coverage, and tone. So how do we find the right formula? Well, we have to consider the finish. Do you like your foundation to look dewy, natural, or matte? The easiest way to think about finish is to ask, how much light do you want the foundation to reflect? Glowy or dewy foundations will reflect the most light, so the skin will look luminous, radiant, juicy, and hydrated. Natural or satin finish foundations will look the most like natural skin. They're not quite dewy, they're not quite matte, they're kind of that perfect Goldilocks in between. Matte finish foundations don't reflect any light, they actually absorb the light. So they're going to look polished, smoothed, and velvety. So now that you've considered finish, the next part is considering coverage. That means how much skin do you want to come through the foundation? It can be full coverage, medium coverage, or sheer coverage. Sheer coverage foundations allow the most skin to shine through. So it's going to look quite skin-like and natural, and it's a great option for someone who likes more of that no makeup look. Medium coverage foundations are obviously that step above sheer, but it's kind of that great midway point if you want to even out the tone, if you want to give that polished appearance to the skin, but you're not quite ready to jump into a full coverage foundation. Full coverage foundations will give a really smooth canvas. You won't really see any skin come through. So if you are someone with freckles, for example, you may not really see those with a full coverage foundation. There are two key factors in determining the right shade for how you like to wear your foundation. The first one is undertone, and the second one is depth. So with undertone, you might be a cool, a neutral, or a warm undertone, and the depth is to do with how much it matches your natural skin tone. So when determining your undertone, there are a couple of little tips and tricks that I'd love to share with you. Warm undertones are yellow and red. Cool undertones can be pink or more of a bluish undertone. With undertones being cool, neutral, or warm, there are a few things that tend to, but not always, cover across those different undertones. For example, if you are someone with a warm undertone, you may be more likely to wear a gold jewelry versus a silver. Another interesting one is around the color of your veins. So if you look at your veins and they look a little bit more blue, you could potentially be more of a cool undertone, versus if your veins look a little bit more green, then you could be more of a warm undertone. If you can see a little bit of both in there, then you may be neutral. This also works with the jewelry factor. If you like to wear gold or silver, or you like to wear both at the same time, there's a good chance you could be a neutral undertone. None of these tips are an exact science, so if you're still a little bit unsure how to navigate undertones, a really great tip is to just try them out. Have a little swatch and you should be able to see between cool, neutral, or warm what's going to work the best for your skin tone. So when you're looking at foundation swatches, if you notice that the swatch looks a little bit grey, then that might mean that it's more of a cool tone, and perhaps that means you're more of a warm tone. If you're looking at it and it's throwing really orange or really red, then it may indicate that you're a neutral or cool undertone, and what you've swatched is more of a warm undertone. If you need additional help, I would always recommend heading into a Mecca store, and our team members will be more than happy to help you out. So a couple of tips on foundation application. If you like a sheer coverage, one of the best tools at your disposal are your hands. So using your fingers, it really kind of works it into the skin, it warms up the product. So you get that really beautiful sheared out natural look to the skin. If you want to build up to a medium coverage, a brush is a great option. Something that has a little bit of movement and is not too dense will help you to blend the product onto the skin. I like to work in sweeping motions, and it's always a good idea to start from the center of the face and work outwards. And if you want to build up to a full coverage, more of a densely packed brush will be able to pick up more product and work it across the skin. When you're using a dense, more tightly packed brush, I like to use more of a stippling or pressing motion, and that really helps to build up coverage. So now that we've applied foundation, it's time to talk concealer. Concealers are your magic wand or pot to control where attention falls on your face. They help you to amplify the features that you want to, and maybe camouflage the ones you don't. The reason that they do this is because they have a super high concentration of pigment, so you can really use them in lots of different ways. So how do we pick the right concealer? Well, we need to consider, do we want the concealer to brighten and illuminate, or do we want it to diffuse and disguise? Hydrating and illuminating concealers will reflect light from the face. So these are a great option if you are concerned with dark circles, if you tend to be a little bit dry or dehydrated under the eye, or perhaps you suffer from creasing, or you're really wanting to brighten and bring parts of the face forward. Mattifying and smoothing concealers absorb light, so they deflect attention away from where they're placed. So this could be a really great option if you are trying to disguise a breakout, some uneven texture, or perhaps hyperpigmentation, or they're another great option if you're using them in areas that are prone to oiliness. Now, if you are looking for a concealer that does a little bit of both, as we often do get asked in store, can't I just have one that does both? We would probably recommend opting for more of a brightening or illuminating concealer that you could then matte down with powder versus opting for a matte concealer that you may want to make glowy. To help with breakouts, we would definitely recommend a mattifying and smoothing concealer. Tips on applying concealer. With brightening or illuminating concealers, you can be really targeted with where you place the product, and that's where you're going to draw the most light. So Fran has mentioned that she holds a little bit of darkness under her eye and she really wants to brighten. So that's where I'm really going to focus the product. So then, using a fluffy brush, I'm going to just gently blend out the edges of that product. So I want to keep the bulk of that product where I placed it, where there's a little bit of darkness under the eye, and then I'm just gently diffusing out the edges. So that's one way to use that concealer. Another way you can use a brightening or illuminating concealer is to add a little bit more dimension to the face and really highlight certain features. So we want to really give a little bit more of a pop to Francesca's cheekbone. So we're going to add a little bit more of that concealer right at the top. You can also use it to carve out other areas of the face, like under the cheekbone, for example. So you can see it's really lifting, sculpting, and brightening. Now with mattifying concealers, as they're drawing light away or drawing attention away, we want to be really precise with the application. So I'm using another eyeshadow brush, but something really, really delicate that I can place the product where I want that extra coverage. So I'm just gently pressing the product into the skin, and then I'm going to gently tap it with my finger. Now with this technique of pinpoint concealing, we're able to maintain that sheer coverage that Francesca likes, but still be able to do a little bit of disguising of the things that we want to. Now, if we're using our mattifying concealer to disguise, we want to make sure that we get as close to our natural skin tone as possible, whereas with our brightening and illuminating concealer, you can opt for 1 to 2 shades brighter than your natural complexion. Now that we've built our base, it's time to set it in place. So we have lots of different powders that can do a number of different things. They can set and improve longevity, they can mattify, and they can diffuse and filter. And they can add a little bit more coverage. Figuring out what you want your powder to do is an essential step in selecting the correct one. If you want your powder to help with longevity and mattify, we would definitely suggest a setting powder. This will really help to lock the products onto the skin, and it will also help to absorb any excess oil that may develop during the day. If you want to weightlessly increase your coverage, then a powder foundation is going to be your best friend. Finishing powders are designed to improve the overall appearance of the foundation, and they're less concerned about absorbing excess oil. So think of them as almost being a filter for the face. So tips on powder application. I like to use quite a small brush and really work it into the skin and into those areas where you'll develop shine, or also where you want to give an extra little setting effect to things you might have concealed. If you want to add a little bit more coverage or perhaps intensify brightness, you can use a tinted powder or a powder foundation. You can use a slightly larger brush for this, as you don't need to be as delicate. And to add that filter-like effect, this is when you would reach for your finishing powders. I like to use a slightly larger brush, being careful not to disturb the products that you've put underneath, so quite a gentle touch. So there you have it, you've aced your base. We've covered a lot in today's masterclass. We've covered picking the right primer, finding the right foundation, and also determining which concealer and powder are going to work best for you. If you'd like to find out more, stay tuned for our next Makeup Fundamentals masterclass, or head into your local store and chat to a team member, or jump onto the Mecca website. See you next time.